Hello, and welcome to Supporting Athletes' Mental Health, an Answers for Families webinar brought to you by the Sports Medicine Division at Boston Children's. My name is Karen Wright, and I am the Director of Content for Boston Children's, and I will be the moderator for today. And as a mom of both a middle school athlete and a high school athlete, I am very excited for this topic. Before we get started, I'd like to touch on a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, this webinar is live on Facebook, but it is also being recorded, so you can watch it back later. Also, we expect there will be a lot of questions, and in fact, we've had quite a few come in already prior to the webinar. So please know we've saved time at the end for some Q&A. If you have any questions that come to mind during the webinar, please put them into the Q&A box on the bottom of this screen. All right, time to meet our panel. I'd like each of you to take a moment to please introduce yourselves. Let's start with you, Kelsey.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelsey Griffith. I am the Performance Enhancement and Rehab Specialist at the Micheli Center for Sports Injury Prevention. We are an affiliate of Boston Children's Hospital Sports Medicine Division. Super excited to be here today. This, of course, I think is an incredibly important topic as a former gymnast and then dancer. It's certainly something I wish had been talked about far more when I was a young athlete. So I'm excited to be a part of today. Thank you so much.
All right. And hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Miriam Rowan. I'm an attending psychologist at Boston Children's in the Division of Sports Medicine and the Female Athlete Program. And I am also a former dancer, former professional ballet dancer. So I work often with the aesthetic sport athletes that we have in our center.
And hi, everyone. I'm Kim O'Brien. I'm a clinical social worker in the Sports Medicine Division, also a research scientist in the Department of Psychiatry. And I'll actually say still a current hockey player in my senior league. I'm not quitting yet, even though probably my teammates are wishing I would. Getting a little old out there. But anyway, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really happy for this panel and talking about this issue that's just so important. And we're just so grateful that you're all here.
Great, thank you so much. And not that this is all about me, but as a former dancer and a mom to two hockey players, this is pretty much my dream team, gotta say. So thank you all for being here. We've got a lot to cover today. So let's get started again with you, Kelsey.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll get the slides up and we will dive right in. All right, so to kick it off, I actually wanted to start quickly with a quote from an op-ed that was actually published just about a week ago by Angela Ruggiero alongside the fabulous Kim O'Brien, who we have here today with us. The op-ed actually concludes with this quote. It says, "Consider the value of mastering topics like focus, enjoying the process, and handling pressure situations, and how those skills translate across all areas of life. If sport truly influences culture, then it is our responsibility to encourage making active mental health training a norm for the benefit of all." And I think that so perfectly sums up what we're here to do today, to kind of start and continue this conversation about mental health and mental skills training for our athletes. The goal is to make this a proactive thing rather than a reactive thing. So here's our goals for the day. We are here to discuss sport culture and the ways in which it's putting undue pressure on our athletes. We're going to take a look at how we can recognize mental health issues in athletes, and then explain how these mental health challenges may present themselves within kind of the sport world and the sport experience. And then finally, we're going to take a look at different strategies, tools that you as parents, and if we have athletes or other professionals on the webinar today, things you can actually do, tools that we can use to promote student-athlete mental health and well-being. So here's a nice quick slide. I am an athlete. All of us here on the panel, and I assume many of you here in attendance today, have had those moments. I'm an athlete. What does that mean? There are certain criteria that we kind of fall into when we start to identify ourselves as an athlete. Kids start to play sports because they're fun, right? That to me, when I have a client come in and tell me they do their sport because they love it, it's music to my ears. Oftentimes, however, that fun can kind of pull away, especially with increasing competitiveness in sport. We're seeing much more of sport specialization, which is defined as participating in intensive training and competition more than 8 months out of the year, participating in one sport to the exclusion of other sports. And we start to see this and kind of define this sport specialization for those athletes who are around 12 years of age. Something I do want to point out is that fun and competitiveness can exist simultaneously. So it's not that if an athlete is specializing in a sport that it's no longer enjoyable. In fact, many of my friends who have young athletes will often say the kids are the ones who are like, Mom, listen, there's this club team and I can play year round. And like, that's really important to them. They get to be with their teammates and see their friends and see their skills develop. So what we want to talk about today is how to recognize when the fun is actually being undermined by that intensiveness, by that strong athletic identity that then can kind of take a toll on our athletes. So to kind of set the stage, when we look at what it means to be a real athlete, and of course, there are many things. However, what we're going to start with today is this idea of the sport ethic. So this is kind of a conceptual framework proposed by Hughes and Coakley. They look at these four pieces to being a real athlete. Athletes are ones who make sacrifices for the game. They strive for distinction. They accept risks and they play through pain. And they also refuse to accept the limits that might be in their way as they pursue all sorts of possibilities. And so what we start to see is that with increasing competitiveness and intensity in sport and these kind of like unwritten criteria that all of these athletes or many of these athletes start to fall into, when you combine those things, is it possible that we're actually creating an environment wherein sport and success actually matters more than the athlete and the athlete's well-being? That's where we want to start to take a further look, to ask questions, to listen to our athletes, and to notice how environments are actually impacting how they're doing in their sport and in their day-to-day lives. So we start with making sacrifices for the game. I know I've been there. We look at this idea of sport above all else. Maybe even academics, right? I work with college athletes who are telling me like, I have to go to this game and I have this giant test and I really am struggling to know what quote unquote matters more. I was a dancer, and this idea of being committed and dedicated to dance, if I did something else, it seemingly undermined that. It meant that just because I was doing, participating in theater at school, which in actuality was helping my dance experience, I wasn't as dedicated. Dance didn't matter enough to me. And so I think when we fall into that trap, that's where, this sport ethic can become challenging for athletes and parents to navigate. And having to meet those demands all day, every day, all the time, especially amidst an 18-month pandemic, especially amidst demands that come from other areas in our lives, can be exceptionally challenging. And when we strive for distinction, this constant drive for improvement, I'm all about improvement, right? So as a mental skills coach, my job with my athletes is to sit down and say, how do we make it 1% better? So this is what happened at yesterday's game. You have a game coming up on this next weekend. What do we do to make it 1% better? Athletes are designed to be self-critical. And yet sometimes that self-critique, when we start to internalize failure as I am a failure, again, that's where we fall into problematic patterns. Desire to attain perfection. I always find this one quite interesting because from the day we're in school, we hear, no one's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And yet we're striving to reach this thing that is essentially unattainable, which is really tiring. And so when that drive and that search for this end goal, this outcome is the sole focus of what we're doing, and we're not necessarily recognizing the progress and achievements along the way, again, it's like we're a rock and we're kind of just chipping away at each thing we don't do, rather than recognizing all of the things we are doing. And with this, pushing limits and boundaries just to get to the top. Accepting risks and playing through pain. So I mentioned earlier, I work with the Micheli Center for Sports Injury Prevention. This is a big one for us. Athletes want to have fun, and we want them to stay healthy. When I work with coaches, I'll say to them, you have 16 athletes on a team. If you're fielding a soccer field, you need 11 of them out there. If 6 of them are hurt, you can't have the best team possible, right? And so we should really work to promote this mindset that pain is your body telling you something. And when that gets overlooked, again, we fall into problematic patterns. Athletes start to believe, like, I can't give up. And travel back about 2 months ago now during the Olympics, as you saw with Kim's op-ed, Simone Biles, there has been a continual conversation about, did she give up? Did she quit on her team? And I think it's important to help athletes recognize the difference between giving up and taking a step back, taking that step to say, hey, what do I need right now to promote my well-being, mentally, physically, emotionally? Within the risk and playing through pain, courage, determination. Yeah, those are really awesome things. And we want our athletes to have those things. Again, it's finding balance in that, finding balance in knowing that there are going to be mental and physical risks. It's a part of sport. But when we kind of extend ourselves into that far realm, when mental and physical risk at the expense of what, that's the question we want to start asking. And then finally, the fourth piece to the sport ethic is refusing to accept limits in the pursuit of possibility. So I want to start this slide with, again, the idea that, like, a lot of these things are actually positive for our athletes, right? Going back to like competitiveness and fun can exist within the same world in sport. What we want to make sure is that, again, we don't then jump to this place of pushing past limits, pushing past boundaries, playing through pain at the expense of what? That's the question we want to make sure we're asking. So that limitations become an invitation to work harder. That's actually a really great thing. Encouraging an athlete to say, hey, you failed. Sure, that's part of it. That's part of the game. How do you take that failure and see it as an opportunity for growth? So again, the athlete then doesn't internalize those limitations and say, I can't, so I'm not good enough. Rather, it's, I didn't, so how do I work towards it tomorrow? We want our athletes to keep dreaming. That's awesome. I love that. I love that idea. But what we sometimes find when, again, increasing competitiveness and an environment that doesn't necessarily support the athlete as a whole person, failure, limitations, boundaries start to kind of shape into this, like, I'm not enough. And I think that's the piece that we really want to be aware of. And we want to start asking questions, parents on this call, coaches, athletic trainers, ask your athlete, how are you doing? Instead of, what did you do at practice today? Let the question become, what did you learn at practice today? What can you work on at practice tomorrow? Continue to promote that growth mindset so that their best in the moment is truly their best, and they can feel that and believe that and feel confident in that to then work to overcome the adversity that they will inevitably encounter as an athlete. So when our athletes are existing within a world where these are the expectations, they're abiding by the sport ethic, they're pushing and working for more, that's them. That, I am a true athlete because I do these things. A lot of weight. These expectations often become kind of these unwritten rules and standards, things they have to meet day in and day out. And what I often say to my athletes is there are going to be days you just don't have it in you. And that's okay. If you can know that, like, this is where I am today and this is what I can do, go after that best. Let that best be okay in that moment, and then take that information and use it as you move forward. We want these athletes to know what they're capable of, to know where these expectations may lie, but to feel in charge of going after them. When they don't feel in charge of it, that's when we start to see these undue pressures. We start to see athletes who are now having their confidence undermined because I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to be able to do these things. And when those thoughts enter into their kind of athlete world and human world, takes them out of the present. It shifts the focus to the uncontrollable. And instead of thinking about what can I do to be 1% better right now, they end up in this world of I have to do well, because if I don't, X will happen, right? And so that's, again, we're asking the questions, can be really, really insightful as parents, as professionals, to see how these athletes are balancing the competitiveness, the fun, the expectations, so that when they're out there and doing their thing, they're in the best possible place to feel successful and to feel kind of whole and capable of achieving their best. And now we'll bounce on over to Miriam and see how some of these expectations, pressures, and sport culture can impact the mental health of our athletes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk more about mental health and why mental health is an important component of where we focus. And it's important to think about it as, mental health is sort of a foundation. And then we have mental skills, which are enhanced by depending on how our athlete is doing on a psychological and emotional level. So both of these components, right, can help our young athletes do a lot of different things that Kelsey just spoke about: enjoying your pursuit, maintaining a high motivation even when there's a lot of pressure, preventing burnout, enhancing recovery from training, and also things like helping the young athlete develop an intuition for how to make split-second decisions in a game, having that kind of focus. So these are some of the many things that mental health and mental skills in combination can help us with. Okay, and so we think about why focus on mental health. So we know this pandemic has been so hard on our adolescents. I'm sure many of the parents out there can attest to this. And so this is one more recent study, and like what it shows here is adolescents, at any given point in time in the United States, are 1 in 3 may have an anxiety disorder. 20% may present with a behavioral disorder, 15% for mood disorders, and over 10% for substance use. And many of these disorders can overlap. So a young athlete could possibly have 2 or more of these. And this is important in a couple ways. One thing is that onset a lot of these disorders happens in adolescence. So, for example, anxiety disorders is not on the slide, but 6 years is a sort of median onset of an anxiety disorder. So 15 for a substance use disorder. So it's important to keep in mind that our young athletes are people, right? They're teens, they're growing up, and they are not necessarily immune to all of the different pressures and mental struggles that the general population is in many respects. And an important thing here is that, adults at any given point in time can meet criteria for a year-long mental disorder at 30%. That's a lot of people. And also these childhood disorders left untreated are also often associated or risk factors for an ongoing struggle in later adulthood. So it's an important thing for us to keep in mind. Okay, so there's a couple things we can do. One is to recognize these mental health issues in our young athletes by recognizing prompting or exacerbating events, those stressors, as well as red flags. Like, what are those behavioral symptoms, so to speak? What are those behaviors and patterns to look for? And importantly, that we also start to recognize opportunities to support. oftentimes we don't know what those opportunities are. And it's really important to kind of key into like, oh, that's a moment. I missed that moment. Next time I'll grab that moment and use that to support my child. Okay, so this word cloud here is just many prompting events, and many of you out there may relate to some of these when you think about your youngster, or if you are an athlete yourself. It's like, what are the things that can be stressors in our athletic environment and in our daily environment outside of athletics that can prompt or exacerbate mental struggles? Right. So having any of these, I think it's important to say, it doesn't necessarily mean that the young athlete will develop a mental health issue, right? But these are sort of laying the foundation, particular vulnerabilities, might I say, that then the young athlete we need to help them be more resilient to. So things like chronic lack of sleep, right? Any kind of family struggle, having an injury or illness that's repetitive, that keeps coming back or doesn't heal properly, right? Ongoing pain, just a general feeling of fatigue that can come from like not having proper fueling. And then also more serious things, right? Like abuse and things like that. But we also have things like bullying, right? So many of these things can prompt a young athlete to struggle in some way. Okay. And Kelsey already spoke a bit about this, but to put it in the context of identifying struggles is how the athletic identity, when it can be so strong, when there's threats to the athletic identity, we have, threats like, for whatever reason, losing motivation to train, time lost due to injury, losing passion for sports, struggling in performance, having a setback in performance, being sidelined in a particular game, right? Conflicts with a coach. All of these can threaten the athletic identity, right? And one of the things that is important to think about is how does it threaten the athletic identity? So it can create an internal conflict in a youngster, right? They can feel a feeling of, I don't even know who I am anymore, feeling the loss of that. And this increases psychological vulnerability, right? It's important here to recognize, thank you, Kim. It's important here to recognize that adults can inadvertently, right, reinforce this over-identification of that athletic identity. And one of the ways that we can avoid this is to think about pointing out all the other aspects of the youngster and continuously think, well, if I'm reinforcing around the athletic identity, can I also be reinforcing other aspects of who they are? Okay. And so another point here is that these are problem behaviors to notice and get curious about, right? And a one-time behavior may not be something necessarily to flag, right? But when we're seeing patterns, and I'll talk about that more in a moment, but these are some sort of things, behavioral signals that we kind of think, like get us curious in a way about what's happening here for this young athlete. For example, any new expression of anger, right? Fighting, and then it can be things like bullying others, right? Lying, any kind of disorganization or coming late to things more often, changes in their appearance, right? Excessive use of social media. We all know that's been a challenge for some. A lot of verbalizing of self-criticism, being really hard on themselves, that black or white, all or nothing thinking, right? All of that. And then we can see physical symptoms, right? So I put in this word cloud, hand wringing, like kind of like fidgeting, agitation, shaking. Like these are signs of anxiety or something's going on internally in terms of the athlete and their sensations in their body and how that connects with how they're feeling and how they're doing, right? Okay. So again, one problem behavior does not mean that a huge intervention necessarily is required here. We're looking for big shifts or changes, right? We're looking for, and I have this continuum here down at the bottom, a continuum from normal to concerning behaviors. We're looking for not that young athlete who doesn't want to go to practice on one particular day. Like, I'm sure we've all been there, right? So we need not overreact necessarily, but if you're, of course, on the other side, if your youngster is wanting to quit abruptly, right, or shifting into language about, I can't stand this sport, like I don't want to do it anymore, right? That would then be kind of a point of concern and want us to look a little more closely, definitely. And then there's behaviors all throughout, right? And this continuum. So not wanting to go to practice for 1 or 2 weeks, definitely concerning, right? And worth looking into, maybe not on the most extreme end necessarily. So we look for big shifts and changes. We also look for extended periods of slow decline or languishing, right? This can often happen when our young athletes are under fueling, right? They have a gradual slow, and so it almost is hard to detect at first. And then you're going, my kid they seem flat in their expression, and they're not sort of saying yes to things as often. They're staying in their room a little bit more, right? As well as just patterns of behavior. Okay. I put this in there as a clinical psychologist. So we think about, like, mental struggles can often be invisible in children and adolescents in particular, and young adults. And they can be invisible to ourselves as athletes and our young athletes, and invisible to parents and coaches. And there's some reasons for that. I think kids don't know what they don't know, right? Whatever they're experiencing might not flag for them. And they might feel like my misery in this situation or my struggle is normal, right? In some way. They may struggle, and then that pathway to self-blaming, right? And then they might feel shame, which the action urge for shame is to hide or ignore, right? Or the young athlete might just have been capable, without realizing it, of adopting some compensatory strategies, right, to mask their limitations. And that can sometimes delay getting the support that they need, right? A couple facts to consider here: that learning disabilities and ADHD, untreated, right, diagnosed or that may have been existing in childhood, can go on to present and is a risk factor actually for later emotional difficulties, substance abuse, and academic difficulties in adulthood. So important to consider. And then also the average age of childhood OCD onset is around 9 to 11 years, depending on gender. And it takes an average of 10 to 17 years that go by in adulthood before adults are diagnosed with OCD. So it's hard to spot. This is one of those diagnoses that are very hard to spot. So one tool that we have, and if there's any concerns or you're wondering, why is my child taking so long to get ready in the morning? It's like an hour or 2 hours to get ready in the morning, things like that. You might go like, what can I do? How can I help more? Is, on sort of a broader scale, there's the neuropsychological evaluation, which can be very helpful in looking at your child's mental, emotional, and learning profile, and then get some recommendations on that, so that your child can get the support they need in terms of how they play their sport and academically. Okay, tips for support. So these are some simple go-to strategies that we can use to help our young athletes. So approaching any of those problem behaviors you see with concern and interest, right? Work to understand with curiosity, right? Oftentimes we see a behavior and we go, what's wrong with you, right? Or, that seems strange, right? And we move into a judgmental stance or a critical stance, or something about it bothers us. So rather, we come with curiosity, right? We pay attention to the words and the emotions being expressed, and we avoid making judgments or interpretations of behavior before we listen for the facts, right? And then, of course, we positively reinforce the sharing of difficulties, right? Because if we want more of a certain behavior, we got to reinforce it, right? And that can help our athletes come back for more support when they need it. Okay. And lastly, there's an idea that we often talk about in psychology, the idea of validating emotions and experiences, right? This is one way that we help communicate to our young athletes that they're not just an athlete, they're a person, right? And so one way we can do this is through simple things, simple behaviors of our own, like eye contact, matching facial expression, verbal comments, like when our youngster is saying, I'm frustrated with the way my coach treated me today. That makes sense. It's understandable given what happened. I bet it sounds like you felt that, like repeating back what they've said, right? We want to validate things that seem like reasonable reactions given what they've been through, right? And note that what is validating to one child may not be validating to another. So it's important to try things out, try ways of being supportive and understanding their perspective. And then if you're seeing them respond by pulling away or becoming more upset, right, then you kind of know it's a flag. Okay, maybe I'll back that up and try something different, right? And of course, one thing that people sometimes don't realize is that actually moving forward and offering resources and getting professional help for your youngster, although they may be pushing it away at times and saying, I don't want this, right? It can actually be quite validating to have the support of parents saying, nope, we see there's an issue, and that can be very helpful at times.
Sorry, I was talking while I was still muted. So thank you, Miriam, for that. Now, once your child has come to you, and I know there's mostly parents on this call, but once your child does come to you and they are able to open up to you a little bit, I felt like it was important for you to understand what are some concrete things you can do. Now, this is you as a parent, as a coach, or even if there are athletes on here yourselves who are watching this, you can do, these are some of the things you can do to help your mental health, okay? So the first piece is to focus on the basics, especially sleep, diet, and exercise. If you focus on these three things, I want to, because these are athletes and they are exercising, let's look at sleep and diet, okay? Sleep, we know that if you are not having a good sleep, it is going to affect your mental health. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that your child is getting good sleep. Diet, again, Miriam talked a little bit about the problem of underfueling, meaning not eating enough for what your body needs. That is a big key that you want to be looking at as well. You want to, just as Miriam talked about, acknowledge and validate their feelings. So I'm not even going to cover this anymore because Miriam nailed it in the last slide. We want to be emphasizing the positives here with our kids. All as human beings, we are really attuned to the negative because that's a survival instinct. We're always looking, our attention is always biased towards the negative, but what we know with kids and what motivates them and what helps them is paying attention to the positives. And I'll talk a little more about this in a minute. We also want to control the controllables. Kelsey, I learned this one from Kelsey and I love it. It's a big one. A big thing she says to a lot of her athletes is like, there are a lot of things out there that you cannot control. Like this pandemic, for instance, we can't control if we get, a COVID exposure and we have to sit out of our sport. What are we going to do now? What can we control that's going to help our mental health in this moment? Helping them to create tangible goals is another thing that can be really helpful. And along with that, helping them find what their purpose is. And I'm going to talk a little more about purpose in a bit. Identity development. Kelsey talked about this a little bit too, and as did Miriam, about, a lot of these teens and youth really have a strong athletic identity, but oftentimes when they're injured or there's another like maybe a COVID closure or something like that, this is important for them to be able to find other identities outside of their sport that they can develop and flourish. We also want to make sure that they're connecting with other people in a meaningful way. One key thing that we tend to see in a lot of athletes, especially those who may have some depressive symptoms, is that they tend to isolate and they're not connecting with each other, and especially in COVID. So what we know is that social connection is a huge, huge piece to healthy mental health. So I thought it would be good to give 5 different mental skills, and I'm going to go through them very quickly because we don't have much time and I want to leave time for questions. But these are 5 main skills that I like to talk with my athletes about from time to time. The first is this whole idea of mindfulness. And mindfulness is really this basic human ability to be fully present, fully aware of where we are, what we're doing, and not be overly overwhelmed or reactive to what's going on around us. So I like this acronym of GO FAR, of the F being feel. Let yourself feel whatever it is you're feeling in the moment. Explore where it lies in your body. So it's your feelings. It's not just an emotion. It's also how you physically feel in your body, and helping your teens and your younger kids to really be able to identify what those feelings are. And then once you have identified the feelings, the next step is to accept them. Accept that this is how you're feeling. We don't want them to try to push these feelings away. And a lot of kids find that this is really counterintuitive because, well, if I feel scared, I don't want to feel scared, so I'm going to try to push it away. But what we find is that if you try to push it away, what does it do? It comes right back at you like a boomerang. So we try to help these kids be able to tolerate that anxiety or the sadness, whatever it is that they are feeling, that's the unwanted emotion, and just allow it to be there. And once you're allowing it to be there, in comes the R of recover. Help yourself recover from that pain, from that emotional pain, by demonstrating self-compassion and by taking care of yourself. Second mental skill is positivity. We touched on this briefly, but it's so key. Positivity in times of adversity, it makes such a huge difference. Ways we can cultivate positivity with our children or the kids we coach, we can, especially as parents, you can encourage them to start their day with a positive affirmation or an intention. So like, I'll give an example for all the other parents out there. I have 4 kids myself, 4 young athletes. And my goal most days, I'll oftentimes wake up and my intention is take a deep breath before you go and yell at your children, because I'm a mental health clinician, but I also am a parent and I know what it's like to feel stressed and be reactive, especially this pandemic. So sometimes when I'm feeling super stressed, I'll try to give myself an intention in the morning. The key with these kids too, you want to help them to transform their negative self-talk into positive self-talk. So this is great for coaches to teach kids when they start talking about themselves, like, I suck, I stink at this, like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst shooter, whatever it is. Okay. You want to help them you want to ask them, when you talk to yourself like that, how does it help you? And usually they say, well, it doesn't. And then what you want to do is you want to say, okay, let's think about what we can say that can act to yourself that's actually helpful. And I often say to them, like, what would you say to a friend if they missed a shot? Would you say, oh, you stink, that was horrible? No, you'd never say that to a teammate. So don't say it to yourself. So it's those kinds of things of how to talk to yourself in the way that you would talk to your friend. That's compassion. You want to train your brain to focus on the positive and to savor it. This idea of savoring is like is a mindful experience. When you're really experiencing something that's positive, be fully present in it. Notice all the senses about it. Really enjoy it. Whether that's like winning a game or scoring a goal and it feeling really good, or even just like fist bump with a teammate. Visualization is key as well. But what we want these kids to do, a lot of times kids say, well, when I try to visualize stuff, I just see myself making a mistake. And then I say, okay, well, let's practice visualizing something positive. Scoring a goal, making a good pass, whatever it is for them. Like, picture yourself doing something positive, and that takes practice. And what we know, a lot of research shows that even a 5 minutes a day of visualization can translate into improved performance and improved mental health. The other key with positivity is you want to surround yourself with positive people. Be with people who make you feel good about yourself. Third is mindset. Mindsets matter, and it's key to know that we can change different aspects of our life if we simply change our mindset. And ways to change our mindset is, one, by changing your self-talk and the language that you're using, which we talked about before with positivity. You want to create new habits that can support your mindset change. For instance, a lot of times athletes feel very low motivation. They say, I just can't get up to do my 6 a.m. training like I used to do, or I'm just tired. I wake up and I just want to hit snooze. What I encourage them to do is, okay, what's a new habit you can do? Can you put your shoes and your workout clothes right by your bed? Like, change a little habit, because when you have poor motivation, what needs to change is the habit around it. You can't necessarily work by starting with the motivation. You start with the habit, which then will translate into the actual motivation later. Another Kelsey statement is, start small so you can finish big. She talks about, these little small wins that we focus on, whether that's, doing something like if you're feeling down on yourself and you're not playing well, you can start by celebrating. Maybe you did something, well, maybe in the locker room, you're a supportive teammate. That's a win. That's great. If you can be, positive and when you're even not playing well. So you start and you stack these little small wins on top of each other so that you end up, feeling a lot of success later. And also this idea of being comfortable with failure, which both Kelsey and Miriam have talked about, the importance of, making mistakes, and that's just part of sport. It's a part of life, and getting these kids used to what you do, how to rebound from failure. We as parents do not need to protect our children from failure. We need to be giving them opportunities to fail, and so that we can then help them learn the skills that they need to be resilient in the face of adversity. Next one is purpose. Purpose is huge for kids, especially now in this pandemic where we're all just like, what the heck is going on here? So a lot of times if kids feel a lack of purpose, I encourage them to read and write about what sparks them, like what gets them going, what do they care about, whether this is within sport or outside of sport. And I ask them to reflect, do some self-reflection, tell their story, and then find and build the community around them that feels purposeful, feels fulfilling. And then these 3 questions can be done as an exercise with them if you're a coach. You can, or even as a parent, you could ask them, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? And how do you want to be remembered? And that's one little activity that can spark this idea of purpose. Then lastly, the mental skill of gratitude. Gratitude is important because it fosters positive feelings and it contributes to an overall well-being. There are some different things you can do to practice it. You can do this as a parent or as a coach, or if you're an athlete watching, these are things you can do on your own. You can start your day by writing out 3 things you're grateful for. One thing I like to do with a lot of my athletes who come in who are feeling a little bit depressed is I'll in the morning have them write down in a journal 3 things they're grateful for. And at night, they're going to write down 3 good things that happened that day. Again, bringing attention to the positives, bringing and then in building on the gratitude that they have. What you can do if they want if they don't like writing and they want something a little more a little different, is you can make a gratitude jar, box, or rock. I like the gratitude jars because you can just put a little Post-it note into a jar of you think of something you're grateful for, like, ooh, Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee. Whoop, write it down, stick it in, and then you just keep building on the different things that happen throughout the day. And then you have this awesome jar that is full of little things. So if you're feeling down one day, you can just pull it out and look at it, and it can be inspiring to you. You can also write a gratitude letter to the person you're most grateful for in your life. I did this thing one time where someone gave a challenge of write a thank you letter to a person or email to somebody every morning for a month. I did that, and it's amazing the emotions you feel when you express your gratitude towards another person. Other ways that you can do it is just do a gratitude reflection while you're walking or sitting. So if you're going on a walk, you're walking the dog, you're just sitting and you're finding you have 1 minute of peace, just sit and focus on and do that mindfulness practice of gratitude, and that can be helpful as well. So I hope those skills can be helpful for you, even if you pick out just one and try it, see how it goes. I'm going to turn it over now to Karen, who's going to facilitate our question and answer.
Great, thank you, Kim. We've had quite a few questions pop up, not surprising. I know I've had a bunch in my own head from this conversation. One thing that had come up in a couple of different ways, Kim, you said could focus on the controllables, sleep, diet, and exercise. And Miriam, you talked about underfueling. We had a few questions on disordered eating for athletes and what is underfueling for an athlete. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe Miriam, you first.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about in our program the idea of low energy availability. We see a lot of athletes that, one of the things that's really important is that athletes are burning a lot of energy all the time, and kids don't often know how much energy they're burning, and they're also growing. So that the caloric intake needed to sustain and to grow and to have muscles and bones strong and functioning properly is much higher than many people think. And so irrespective of whether a young athlete might have like a body image issue, many athletes start to languish because of low energy availability. There's just not as much coming in as is going out over time chronically. right? So there's that issue. And then, of course, there's for some, and we see this a lot with our aesthetic sport athletes, right? Gymnastics, dance, that kind of thing, ice skating, right? That then there's this drive for thinness, right? That the young athletes in a culture where there's expectations put on them, and where they're judged for their physical appearance as part of the overall achievement, where we start to see more vulnerability to both the low energy availability over time, right? and this sort of low self-esteem that comes with it, and that body criticism and preoccupation, right? Yeah.
Kim?
Anything to add to that?
I guess the only thing I'd add, given that there's so many parents on this call, is the influence of social media on this, and how it's been a big participant, a big contributor to this literally epidemic we have right now with eating disorders since the start of COVID. There's a lot of contributors to it. This could be a whole other talk in its own, and it has been, we've done before, but it's really so critical as parents that you're aware of the types of things your kids are seeing on TikTok or whatever social media they're on, because there are a lot of these things, these challenges that go on there, like what I ate in a day, and they hold up an almond in their hand or something like that. And this is really happening. And these kids are really, especially the kids under age 16 who their frontal lobes haven't been fully developed. They really think that this is what you're supposed to do. And they can get stuck so quickly. So I actually think it's these younger kids, like under 16s, that you really got to watch as parents of what are they seeing. If you're noticing any difference in their intake, you need to really pay attention to that and take it seriously.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd also want to add that Boston Children's Sports Medicine does have have multiple nutritionists on staff, and there's also actually nutritionists throughout the hospital. And I wanted to remind everybody that this is being recorded and will be available thereafter. We've had a few questions pop up about how do I get this to share with other parents, coaches, athletic directors. So we love getting those questions, and please share the recording. We'll be emailing it out to people who signed up. Why don't we stay with you for a minute, Kim? And we've also had a lot of questions come up about anxiety. How do you support a child that loves a sport but becomes overcome by anxiety? How do you handle it when they just get to the point where they can't even perform or everything on the range up until then?
I think this is a really hard question, a tricky thing for parents. And I am a parent of 4 little student athletes myself, so I can relate this, and one with anxiety. So it's a really hard thing to figure out as a parent, how hard to push your kid, because you don't want to, you want to push them for the right reasons, meaning you don't want to push them at something they don't love and that they don't find enjoyment in. But if you do think that they are enjoying it, but there's an anxiety component to it, then it actually is important to push. And we call this, doing exposures with them, exposing them to situations where they can be afraid, maybe have a tantrum, maybe get, anxious, and be able to still do it. Because what we don't want them to learn is that when they're scared, they don't do things and they shut down. What we want them to learn is when you're scared, you can go ahead anyway and do it, and you're going to be okay. So you want to start by, exposing them to like little things. If your kid is one of those anxious kids who just really has a hard time with performance based things, you can start by, talking with them. An exposure would be even talking with them about, what do you imagine is going to be scary about this? And, kind of talking it through, and then what might you do to help yourself, and just kind of talking them through it, so that once they're in the actual situation, the hope is that they'll be able to utilize some of these skills. But, this is a really hard situation, but the answer is not to shelter your child and not have them experience this. The answer is to give them the skills they need to help themselves in these cases, like in these circumstances that are really scary for them.
That's great. Thank you, Kim. And kind of continuing with that, I think the question of how do you talk to your kid on the car ride home is always a challenge. I mean, I know a lot of people, in my life I've read the books. I'm not supposed to ask. How do you not ask? How did you miss that, or how do you feel, or what did the coach say, or all that stuff. You're just trying to connect with your child. And I'm sure when there's anxiety issues, it's even more challenging. So Kelsey, how do you start those conversations? When and how?
So the car conversation is one of my favorite things to talk about. I have mixed feelings about it because I don't have kids personally, but I know that everyone's busy, right? So sometimes these kids are leaving the house as early as 5:50 in the morning to catch the bus, and they're coming home at 9 o'clock at night, and maybe the car is the only time you have to talk to them. That said, I refer to the car as your metal box of emotion. And I work out of the Micheli Center in Norwood, and we're at a figure skating facility. Many of the kids travel really, really far to get here. Like we're talking 1.5-hour, 2-hour car rides. And so if you get in the car and you're now in this metal box of emotion, and the first thing that comes out is something that kind of sparks tension on either the parent or athlete side, you have 2 hours to kind of work through that and hopefully work through it. But, I imagine sometimes that can be hard. So to have the conversations, if that is the time you can be with your athlete and you can talk about those things, I actually encourage parents and athletes to work to set boundaries around those conversations before they get in the car. So if you can have, and I will often do this with parents and clients in sessions where I'll have them come in and we'll talk together where we can say, mom's like, well, hey, I want to know how it's going. And the kid's like, I want to tell you, but I want to have a little more control in how we have that conversation. And the mom's like, oh, okay, like we can do that, right? And so they start to see maybe the question isn't, how did it go? How did it go implies good or bad. And when it's good or bad, like as the athlete, you have to make that decision. And usually, because as Kim said, we're designed to look for what's not good, it's often going to be not good, right? And so instead of how did it go, maybe the question is, maybe the boundary or the rule for the start of the conversation is, when you get in, I want to know one good thing that happened today. They start there, and then that can kind of lead them into other possibly more challenging conversations.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think the single most important thing you can say as a parent to your child is, I love watching you play. I love watching you play, because that's not about, did they score a goal? It's not about the outcome. It's about you loving them, regardless of whether or not they score 50 goals or let in 50 goals. It doesn't matter. It's, I love watching you out there, and that's what's important. So just to remember to focus on the process versus the outcome when you're talking to your kids about things, about the effort they've put in rather than, what comes out of it.
There are a lot of questions here. It's challenging to pick which ones. I wish we had a lot more time. One quick one. We've been talking a lot about feelings that are internalized and performance-based, but what about when you've got a team and it's such a part of a child's life and there starts to be some bullying on the team based on that child's, either their performance or adolescence or their perceived impact on what happened in a game or a meet or what have you? Miriam, do you want to start with that?
Yeah. So, this is so hard. I had a supervisor once that said, who knows how to deal with a bully, but so in a sense, this is really hard. And I do think that this is also about culture and team culture and, sort of at the coach level rather than at the parent level. And in a lot of ways, making sure that the team really gets that education on how to deal with setbacks as a group, right? Because you do see, of course, none of us are really that happy with a failure, or it's not necessarily a failure, but a setback, right? Nobody's happy with that. And oftentimes when we're not happy with that, we go into sort of blaming or trying to figure out why something happened in ways that maybe aren't that helpful, right? Or accurate. So I think that coaches can do a lot of useful good here in terms of just setting before the team even plays, setting expectations. If this, maybe not even saying if this doesn't go well, but when we have those expected defeats and things like that, we're gonna look at it in a non-judgmental way. What happened, right? What happened, rather than pointing fingers at one particular person, right? On an individual level, it's a little bit harder, right? But parents can, of course, just be, again, with all those skills that I mentioned before, that validation and trying to help the teen have a place to just express what they're going through and get some validation that what they're experiencing makes sense, right? If they feel uncomfortable or unsafe, right?
Great. And I think as a final part B to that question, Kim, what kind of training do coaches generally get in these kinds of soft skills? I know they get concussion training, but what kind of training do they have in that?
Well, the fact that I'm a coach of I try to coach all my kids' teams, which is, I don't know, it's hard to juggle, but I love it so much because I love that, being able to see them all like having fun and working hard. But it's funny, you'll see in the coaching circuit, you'll see these other coaches who they're so negative, they're yelling, they're screaming, and they're thinking they're motivating these kids, but that's not what motivates kids. And they don't, because they don't know, but that's what we grew up with. So that's what we think we're supposed to do, people my age and in my 40s. So, but it's shifting now. For people who are interested, for all the coaches on here, if you don't already know about the Positive Coaching Alliance, I think it's positivecoach.org. Definitely go to that website. They have a lot of really good tips about how to be a more positive coach and why you won't, not only will you have better relationships with your athletes, but you'll also see your performance improve.
Well, that's great information and great to share. We have, as I said, a bunch more questions that I wish we could get to, but please know that we will take this as direction for more webinars to come. Thank you, Kim, Kelsey, Miriam, for your time today and for sharing ways to help the young athletes in all our lives. And thank you to everyone who turned in. If you need more information and tools for your athlete, our website is always a great place to visit. That's bostonchildrens.org/sportsmed in this case. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.